All right, we are going to wrap up our fraction decimal percent equivalencies with going from decimals to percents and percents to decimals, and then working with percents to fractions and fractions to percents. All right, so our first one is fairly basic, using something, again, we already know. We have lots of bits and pieces of information that all we're doing for this unit is just putting puzzle pieces together. All right, to go from a decimal to percent, we know that percents are out of 100, right? So since we are already familiar with our base 10 system, knowing that percents are out of 100, we are really just going to be scaling up and scaling scaling up and scaling down by 100, meaning we're going to either be multiplying by 100 or dividing by 100. All right, so to go from a decimal to a percentage, the reason we've got little Dr. Peppers up here is it's a little memory reminder for how to go from a decimal to a percent. Dr. Pepper decimal to a percent. And what's awesome is that we are actually moving in the direction that we are going, which we'll see in just a second. All right, so to go from a decimal to a percentage, we are going to be scaling up, multiplying by 100, right? And if we're multiplying by 100, our number is going to appear to get bigger, right? So decimal to a percent, all we're doing is moving our decimal place over 2 times. All right, when we multiply by 100, we're increasing its place value 2 times. So we take our decimal, we're multiplying by 100, so all we're doing is moving our decimal over twice, 1, 2, Dr. Pepper. So 23 hundredths is equal to 23%. 7 tenths, I'm taking my decimal, I'm moving it twice, Dr. Pepper. I'm multiplying by 100. What do you think we're going to put in this big open space? An imaginary 0, so 7 tenths is equal to 70%. Even if our next one, we've got a whole number with a decimal, doesn't matter. I am taking my decimal and I am scaling it up by 100. Dr. Pepper. So I have 138%. Is it possible for a percentage to be bigger than 100? Well, yes, and we're going to see that especially when we start looking into businesses and profits, and if we are marking prices up as a business so we can make a profit, all these really great things. So percentages can definitely be bigger than 100. We're going to see real life examples of that soon. All right, 2 and 4 tenths. Again, taking that decimal and moving it over 2 times, Dr. Pepper, placeholder 0, that's 240%. Our next one, 536 thousandths. Take your decimal, move it over twice, 53 and 6 tenths percentages. Percentages can totally have decimals within them. I encourage you to take a peek the next time that you have a receipt, whether you're at a restaurant or a Target or HEB, look at the sales tax and take a peek at what that percentage looks like. Last one, Dr. Pepper. Move it over 1, 2, and again, right, we're going from a decimal to a percent, so we're just following that Dr. Pepper, D to P. 1, 2, that's 7%. Okay, and to go from a percent to a decimal, well, we're just scaling it down by 100. So instead of multiplying, we're simply dividing. And again, I love that little Dr. Pepper reminder because I'm literally going from my percent to my decimal, 1, 2. Right, and all I'm doing again is moving the decimal in my percentage. So if I look at 23%, I don't have a decimal. Where do we think the decimal is? If I put it up front, well, that made it 23 hundredths of a percent, not 23%. If I put it in the middle, well, now that is 2 and 3/10 percent, not 23%. My decimal is over here at the end for 23%. I'm gonna divide by 100, Dr. Pepper, move it over twice, 23 hundredths, right? They're equivalent. Same thing over here. I don't have a decimal, So it goes at the end so that I don't change the value of that percentage. Going from a percent to a decimal, so I'm going to divide by 100, 1, 2, scale it down, decimal, 7, 0. Do we need that 0 on the end? Not necessarily. This is okay to write it, but we could also just say that it's 7/10, equivalent. 138%, same thing, decimal at the end, 1, 2, 1 and 38 hundredths. Same thing, 240%. Our decimal is on the ends because it's invisible. We have to place it ourselves. Divide by 100, 1, 2, 2 and 4 tenths. Or we could say 2 and 40 hundredths, but we know that that 0 on the end, really, we can get rid of it. All right, now 53 and 6/10%. We are given a decimal, so we're going to use it. Divide by 100, move backwards 2 place values, 536 thousandths. Right, then our last one, 7%. 1, 2% to a decimal. What are we going to put in that big open space? A placeholder 0, so that's equal to 7 hundredths. All right, so there we are. Decimals to percents, percents to decimals. We are either scaling up by 100 or scaling down by 100. And we can use Dr. Pepper to remember which direction we are moving in. Awesome. All right, now we're going to move on to our next little section, percents to fractions and fractions to percents. All right, the nuggets we need to know. Percents are out of 100. So place your percent over 100 and simplify. For example, 24% means we have 24 out of 100. Right? Leaning on things that we already know. Right? 1%. Percents are out of 100, so I have 1 out of 100. Right? You can even put that little percent sign there to help you remember. Just 1 out of 100. 120%, same thing. 120% out of 100. Now this one is a little different because I have an improper fraction, but we treat it just the same. I see that my denominator is 100, so I can pull 1 whole out of that 120 with 20 left over. And then ask ourselves, can we simplify that even farther? All right, what can I divide 20 and 100 by? The biggest number I can divide them both by would be 20. So divide by 20, divide by 20. Both of those guys, that's going to leave us with 1 and 1/5. Okay, our next one, 60%. Percents are out of 100, so we have 60 out of 100. Right, and what can we divide 60 and 100 by? Well, they both end in 0. If they both end in 0, keep it simple. If they end in 0, I can divide them both by 10. Divide both of them by 10, so that gives me 6 over 10. Just got rid of those zeros on the end. All right, then I'm still not done because I am left with 2 even numbers. And I know that even numbers can always be divided by 2. All right, so what's half of 6? 3. What's half of 10? 5. There is my final answer. All right, then my last one. I've got 33%. That is 33 out of 100. And y'all, I cannot simplify this. I can't, the only numbers I can divide 33 by are 3 and 11. And I can't divide 100 by either of those numbers. So that is as simple as it goes. This one is different than 33 with 3/10 repeating forever. We've got this one memorized because we know that this equals 1/3. But this extra little nugget on the end, no matter how small it is, makes it completely different than just regular 33%. All right, then our last part, we're going to go from fractions to percentages. And there are a couple of things that we can do here. Our first thing is, since percentages are out of 100, we can scale our denominator up to 100. And there's a little note on here that says we're really just using equivalent fractions. And we'll see that right now, right? So 4/5, well, percents are out of 100. So can we scale up, right? 5 times what gives us 100? Times 20, which means I've got to do the same thing on top. So 4 times 20 gives us 80. Percents are out of 100, so 80 out of 100 is going to give us 80%. Right, same thing with 1/4. You might have it memorized, so we're going to do it as an equivalent fraction. How do I get from 4 to 100? Right, 4 quarters make $1, so 4 times 25. Same thing on top. 1 times 25 gives us 25. So 25 out of 100 gives us 25%. Now, that's great, but most numbers are not going to scale up very nicely to 100. 2 does that wonderfully, so does 4 and 5 and 10 and 20 and 25 and 50. But that's really about it. That's not the majority of numbers we're going to be working with. So we need a plan B. Our second method, if we can't scale up to 100, we can lean on things we already know. Turn our fraction into a decimal and then use Dr. Pepper, right? Go from our decimal to our percent. So here's our example, 1/8, right? If we try to create an equivalent fraction, it just doesn't work. So we lean on plan B, which means we're gonna divide. Our top dog goes in the house, our denominator goes out the door, and we just divide. 8 goes into 1, 0 times, add a decimal, 8 goes into 10. Just doing our division, nothing fancy with this. 8 goes into 20. One more time, and there we go. All right, so now we have a decimal, and then we're just gonna go from our decimal to a percent. 1, 2, 12.5%. All right, so when in doubt, lean on things you know. All right, so there we go. Going from a decimal to a percent using Dr. Pepper, percent to fractions, percents are out of 100, and using all the little things we know to go from fractions to percentages. All right, there we go.